Welcome back to the End-Time Remnant YouTube channel. This is Dorothy, and this is the second installment of the Who's That Girl series. I wanted to make sure that I took some time in the beginning of this year to share my personal testimony with each of you in the hopes that it would bless someone to know just how faithful God really is. And even during those years when we weren't saved, it's easy to look back and just see his hand at work in our lives the entire time. So this particular video covers my testimony from ages 7 to 18, right about the time that I went away to college. And so before I get started, I just wanted to say this much. This video took me a while to put together because honestly, the content is very heavy for me. It's not a question of whether or not the Lord has healed or delivered me. I think it's just rather the fact that it's sad that any of it even happened. I don't think any child should have to deal with trauma put upon them by adults who are supposed to actually protect them. And yet, right, the times that we're living in, all over the globe, there are far too many children who are being victimized and abused in some form or fashion. And they are being left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives through no fault of their own. I just always feel like anytime you see a dysfunctional adult or an adult who is just really struggling, if you were to sit down with that man or if you were to sit down with that woman, it would all be traced back to some form of childhood trauma. And so, again, this part of the testimony is from age 7 to 18. And I'm picking up where I left off in the last video. I was about 7 years old when my mother gave her sister, my aunt, custody of my sister and I. We moved from Harlem to a suburb in Monmouth County, New Jersey, called Fairhaven. Fairhaven was a culture shock in more ways than I was actually prepared for, to be candid. It was a far cry from Harlem in the 1980s, and I immediately struggled to feel at home. I missed my parents, I missed my baby brother. The only person I had and truly trusted was my older sister. But even though we were there together, I still felt like an alien. My aunt enrolled us both into Knollwood School in Fairhaven. And my sister and I would walk to school together each morning. However, during my first few days at the school, I remember struggling. Absolutely none of the teachers were black. None of the students were black. None of them talked like me. I had a very distinct New York accent at that time. It was just extremely overwhelming for me. A lot of the young students were just like kind of looking at me. It was almost like I was like some type of display in a museum. I felt like a fish out of water. And mind you, just keep in mind, I'm only 7 years old and I've just been separated from my parents and my brother. And here I am at this new school. And there's absolutely no one who looks like me. So I had an absolute meltdown. I began to cry, and I just wouldn't talk. My teacher attempted to console me, but I really wasn't trying to have any of that. I was just undone. I do remember her leaving our classroom for about a minute, and she came back with another teacher, and I heard them talking, and that other teacher said to her, "I believe she has a sister upstairs. I will go get her." So that teacher went to go get my sister from her class. And so my sister comes into my classroom to comfort me, and I am just an absolute mess. I am crying and I'm whispering to my sister how weird everyone looks, how weird everyone talks, how no one looks like us, how much I just want to go home. She wipes my tears and she reassures me that everything would be okay. And for that day, my teacher allowed me to go with her to the cafeteria during her lunch period. So that was also comforting. But I share that part with you because I just want you to really understand what's going on in my 7-year-old mind during this time. Right? So my family Nuclear family as I once knew it completely dismantled. My mother is addicted to drugs and can no longer take care of her children. Me and my sister and my brother are actually split up. My brother goes to live with my mom's other sister in New York City. And then eventually he would make his way out to Long Island with my mom's older brother. So there's that dynamic going on. You know, we're separated from my mom and dad, but now we're separated from our brother. There's just a lot going on. And then add insult to injury, I'm looking around and I don't see any black people. And I'm just kind of like, what is going on? Because literally Harlem was the exact opposite of that. Now, granted, prior to moving from Harlem, I was going to a school downtown that had, much more diversity, but I lived in Harlem. So when I went back home, there were people who looked like me. Now I'm in this new city. It's not a city, it's a suburb. And I'm just struggling. I'm struggling to fit in. I'm struggling to understand what's going on in my little world at that time. So the very next day when I went to class, there was a young black girl who actually did go to that school. But she'd happened to miss the first couple of days for whatever reason. She and I became very fast friends. However, that was all very short-lived because at some point the teachers at Knollwood began to tell my aunt that I was not up to par scholastically, and they thought that I needed to be put in some type of special class in order to go at a slower pace. But considering the fact that I'd literally just come from a gifted and talented program in downtown Manhattan, the whole she has trouble learning and she needs to go at a slower pace just didn't make any sense to my aunt. So my aunt took me to St. James Elementary School in a neighboring town called Red Bank to take an entry test. The entry test had 100 questions and I got 2 of them wrong. Okay. And I share that with you because I don't really know what was going on at Knollwood. But there was absolutely nothing slow about me. There was nothing, I never struggled academically. So, my aunt enrolled me into St. James Elementary School, which was a Catholic school. And that is where I was until I graduated the 8th grade. Once again, right, regardless of what I was experiencing personally, I was doing well academically. In terms of my parents during this time, I didn't really hear much from my mom. My dad would call from time to time. Over the years, he would visit from time to time. A couple of times he brought my mom out to visit. We just really didn't see them regularly, and we didn't really talk to them regularly. We talked to them every now and again. Financially, my dad did provide. He did send my aunt money. What I do know for a fact was that he paid for my Catholic school fees each month. He sent that to her. So it's not like she had absolutely no help raising their children. And I want to make that clear because if I'm telling the story, it needs to be told correctly. Yeah, she definitely took on a financial burden to take in me and my sister, but she was not left high and dry to pay for everything. When I look at this particular picture, I see the smile of an 8-year-old, but there is just so much going on behind that smile. They say the eyes are the window to the soul, and what a story I could tell you during this particular time in my life. So my aunt was mother to 3 girls. But all of them were significantly older than my sister and I. In fact, when my sister and I moved to Fairhaven, the oldest 2 were already in college and the youngest was about 16 and she was in high school already. That cousin was actually rather mean to my sister and I. And in retrospect, I suppose I understand her lack of excitement to have to now share resources with 2 cousins from New York when she was so used to having the house all to herself, being that her 2 older sisters had, gone on to college. However, it's important to detail her lack of warmth toward us, and it's important to detail the lack of close relationship there because it'll help you to understand quite a few things later on in the testimony. So my aunt was married to a corrections officer, and together they raised their three children. And now my sister and I were part of their household. From the naked eye, everything looked rather normal, but I would soon learn that things are not always as they seem. Okay? At the age of 8, my aunt's husband began molesting me. And this literally went on until I was about 17 years old and headed to college. When it first happened, I was afraid, I was confused, I felt dirty, I felt worthless. And in many ways, the abuse solidified in my mind that my life was not valuable to my own parents, nor was it valuable to him. Right? So although I was only 8, my mind was not that of an 8-year-old. I understood more than anything what would happen if I went to school and told my white teachers that my uncle was a pedophile. I knew there was a very high probability that I may never see my sister again because they would most definitely come and remove us from that home. So I kept my mouth closed and I dealt with the burden of that shame and secrecy for many years. I never thought to call my parents and tell them what happened to me either, because in my mind it was very simple. If they cared about me, then I wouldn't have been out here to begin with, right? That's what I'm thinking in my head, right? Your mother's a drug addict and your father is busy playing dad to someone else's children. Again, I'm 8 years old, but I was not the average 8-year-old, right? My mind was just so mature, and it was because I had gone through so much already. I had to adapt. Like I wasn't Alice in Wonderland at all. And so I kept my mouth shut because it felt like the only way to survive and stay connected to the only person on earth that I was sure actually loved me, and that was my sister. It's like, you can go to this school and you can tell these teachers what's going on in this house, and then you can run the risk of, before you even make it home, someone from the state being there to come collect you and your sister, the two of you being separated, and you possibly never seeing her again. I just wasn't willing to risk that at all. I absolutely always loved this picture of us. We didn't have the best clothing. Our hair was a mess. We were actually walking along the street to our grandmother's house. And that was like kind of like the mid 80s in terms of what was going on in Harlem. Harlem was an absolute mess at that time, but we were happy. We had each other. And as idyllic and safe as it looked from the naked eye, Fair Haven was no haven for me at all. And I felt much safer on the dirty streets of Harlem than I did in this suburban, pretty, white neighborhood. And it's just always been something for me. Like, I've just never really been able to wrap my mind around that. You know, a lot of times we take a look with our natural eyes and we see certain things and we just make all these assumptions. So in addition to having to live under the same roof with a pedophile for countless years, my aunt was quite the disaster herself. It wasn't until I got saved and filled with the Holy Spirit that I began to understand what witchcraft really is. When someone says witchcraft or they say witch, a lot of people often think of like some witch stirring some type of brew in a cauldron, casting spells and flying around on brooms. But the Holy Spirit helped me to understand something very clear. Witchcraft is intimidation, it is manipulation, and it is domination. And anything that people say or do that falls in alignment with those three things is witchcraft. Okay, and the household I grew up in was filled with it, from the attic to the basement. My aunt was controlling. She was mean. She was nasty. She was violent. She yelled a lot. And the household and all of that witchcraft in it was extremely damaging to my soul. So not only did she control her husband through yelling and threatening, but she did the same with everyone else in the household. It was almost as though her mood for the day kind of set the tone of how everyone else's day was going to go. Right? If she was okay that day, then you might have an okay day. If she was angry that day, then it was highly likely she would lash out at some point and make sure, your day wasn't so great either. And as a child, I just always remember being fearful. That spirit of fear had its way with me because of the type of environment I was literally marinating in. I always remember feeling like I couldn't make any mistakes. You can't mess up. You have got to do this right. You have got to do this perfect, or you are going to get into trouble. I always remember feeling like I had to perform in order to be acceptable to her. I always remember feeling like I was an orphan she took in out of obligation, not someone she actually loved. And that I needed to make sure I did everything she wanted me to do in order to be acceptable to her. She treated my sister and I like redheaded stepchildren, and that's just the God's honest truth about it. I'm not trying to sit here and sprinkle any type of sugar on this testimony. I want you to know just how whack my childhood really was, because it was. Am I grateful that she even bothered to come get us at a time when my parents were not up to the job? Perhaps. You feel me? Perhaps. But sometimes I can't help but wonder what my life would have been like had I never been exposed to her witchcraft or her husband's perversion. People are quick to be like, well, had she never come and get y'all would have been in foster care. Y'all would have been here. Y'all would have been there. Well, the truth of the matter is I don't know where I would have been. I don't know where my sister would have been. You know what I mean? I don't know where my brother would have been. There's no way for me to know what our lives would have been. And so what I won't do is definitively say her coming to get us from Harlem made all the difference in my life, because I don't really know. You know what I mean? There was just far more bad coming out of that household than good. Her and her husband offered a roof over our heads, a bed to sleep in, and food on the table. You know what I mean? All the other things that children need to thrive, we did not get. We got the exact opposite of that. So, I don't know. As a youth, I got spanked a lot. I got yelled at a lot. There was always some type of drama going on in that house. Okay. She was overly strict and very controlling, and that's the best way to describe it. I felt like I couldn't breathe. And this was a far cry from what my sister and I were used to when we were living with our mother and father. We were disciplined children. We were indeed disciplined children, but there was love there. But when you're under the control of a tyrant, the smallest, most minute things seem to warrant punishment. Right? Those types of people literally feed off of the control that they can have on another human being. And that was my aunt. Just a lot of yelling, a lot of threatening. And just for the smallest things. I want to make it very clear that I wasn't some fast, rebellious adolescent teen that just wanted to do whatever she wanted to do. Not at all. I was very, very respectful. I got excellent grades. I was very responsible and mature for my age. And because of that, I always just kind of felt like if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, when I asked to go to birthday parties, the skating rink, the beach, or the mall, why exactly is there always pushback? Like, why is me just doing what regular young people and young teenagers do? Why is there always an issue? Why do I feel like a prisoner? My sister and I weren't allowed to do much of anything. And the older cousin I mentioned earlier seemed to have freedoms that my sister and I could only dream of. And I really wish I could say it was due to the age gap and her being 16. But as my sister turned 16, and then as I turned 16, I'm able to look back and see, no, it had nothing to do with age. Right? We were flat out treated differently, and there was nothing that can convince me otherwise. For some reason, we were made to feel like we had to be heavily watched and disciplined, otherwise we would be out of control. I just literally felt like I was in a jail. And because I was such a natural social butterfly, I struggled to really align with not being able to do anything socially. right? Everything was about getting good grades. I wasn't really allowed to make friends and have friends over and, do all the things that young folks do. I just wasn't able to do that. I was just always so serious. I wasn't good at making friends. It was just really weird. My sister was far more relaxed and honestly couldn't care less about going places or meeting new people. She's just really chill. So my aunt's laundry list of rules didn't really impact her socially because she just really wasn't on the social tip. But me, something completely different. The only extracurricular things I remember doing in middle school was gymnastics and cheerleading. So I graduated from the eighth grade in 1994. That is my aunt in the picture with me. And I remember my mother coming out to New Jersey for my graduation on that day. And in full transparency, I was always excited to see my mother, but I was always worried about if she would be on her best behavior or not. I was always fearful that she would somehow embarrass me because although she'd promised to go to rehab and get better, every single time I saw her, it became very clear that that was a lie. She was very much still on drugs and her behavior was quite erratic. There was never any way to know what would set her off or how she would react in any given situation. And so, more times than not, it ended in an absolute circus. And honestly, it was just embarrassing to have her around most times. I mean, it is what it is. I was mature enough to understand that it was the drugs, but I was also still young, and her lack of self control was just so annoying and embarrassing to me. So, in the fall of 1994, I started high school at the Marine Academy of Science and Technology, and it was a specialized high school that focused on ROTC and various marine sciences. Let it be known, it was not my desire to attend this high school. That decision was 110% my controlling aunt. However, at the age of 14, I was not in the driver's seat of my life just yet. So I went to the school because I had no choice. But in retrospect, I'm glad I went. It was a blue ribbon high school, very academically sound, and the rigorous courses prepared me greatly for college. So I am grateful for that opportunity. At the same time, this is when my sister graduated from high school. So as I was starting high school, she had graduated high school. And this is when she left the house and went away to college. And I understood that she would not be coming back to that house. So I was left alone in Fairhaven by myself with my aunt and her pedophile husband. And truthfully, there are only a few times in my life when I cried like my life was over. And this was really one of them, because I understood that I was now on my own and I felt every bit of that weight on my shoulders. And mind you, this was this was before the rise of the cell phone. So it definitely wasn't about to be a situation where I could just text my sister to say what's up and she could just text me back, right? I wasn't going to have direct access to my sister, and I understood that. She was headed to Washington, D.C. for school, and I was stuck back in New Jersey having to deal with things no one my age should ever have to. And so it was just a really tough transitioning period for me. High school was pretty uneventful. I went to school, I did my work, I went to a couple of their naval balls, which is basically prom. I had one best friend the entire time. Again, the experience of high school was just pretty chill. My aunt controlled what I wore, how I did my hair, who I should be friends with. It was just a lot. It's just very, very controlling. On Saturdays, my aunt signed me up for an engineering program called PACE at a local community college. Yet again, something I wasn't interested in. But I guess she felt like I didn't deserve a weekend break. Right? So school Monday through Friday, PACE on Saturday, and church on Sunday. Just absolutely no time whatsoever to just be me and enjoy my teen years. She was just very controlling. And that is what witchcraft is. She sent me to that particular high school that I was going to because she wanted me to have a career in the sciences. And she enrolled me in that engineering program on Saturdays because she wanted me to consider a career in engineering. But let me just stop right here and say this to all of you who are already parents, especially those of you who are in the body of Christ, right? I can't speak to those who aren't saved, but I can speak to those of you who have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And I will tell you this: don't you dare attempt to control the direction in which your children head regarding the purposes God has mandated on their lives. Your job is to raise them to be God-fearing, law-abiding citizens of society, and you allow God to lead them in the way they should go. Far too many of these parents desire to live vicariously through their children, and they intentionally manipulate their children into making decisions that do not align favorably with the will of God for their lives. We got a lot of controlling parents out here. We got a lot of parents who are guilty as sin of witchcraft, and it's foul. Now, if there's one thing my aunt did consistently, it was drag me to church. And I didn't like going to church. And it wasn't because I was some hellion who didn't believe in God. Rather, because church attendance felt fraudulent to me. My aunt was truly evil to me in our household, but then I would see her morph into someone completely different the minute we stepped into the church building. And it just put a very sour taste in my mouth, to be candid. And when I graduated from high school, I made up in my mind that church wasn't for me. Whatever Jesus she was praying to, I didn't want anything to do with him. And as far as I was concerned, she and many in the church were double agents. They pretended to be holy on Sunday morning, but for the remainder of the week were just as evil as could be. And this was a turnoff to me. It was a huge turnoff to me. Church on Sunday mornings, sometimes again for evening service. Tuesday night Bible study, choir rehearsal on Fridays. It was just absolute overkill. We stayed in the church building, and yet I couldn't see Jesus anywhere on her. And so yet again, let me stop here and speak to the parents. There's nothing wrong with taking your children to church, mom and dad. But just make sure church is more than a building you attend on Sunday, all while showing your children something completely different in your speech and behaviors all week at home. The truth of the matter is your children should know who Jesus is, not by the way you religiously drag them to the church building, but how you love them unconditionally at home. You understand what I'm saying? You are the church. You are the church. I mean, they're supposed to know Jesus by the way you love them. Far too many of these quote-unquote church mothers are complete witches at home, but they make sure to put on their Sunday's best and perpetrate a fraud on Sunday morning. And I am warning you, do not do this, because you may be the very reason why your child runs from the Lord and never returns. You know, I always felt like my aunt spent way too much time disciplining and controlling me, that she was unable to clearly see the victimization I was suffering at the hands of her perverted husband. And that caused me to be very angry. It was like nothing could get by her. You know what I mean? Absolutely nothing could get by her. Like she was just so on it. Everything, every rock turned over, like just so vigilant when it came to everything except what she needed to be paying attention to. She would read my diaries, and if she didn't like what she saw, I'd get into trouble. So that actually caused me to stop writing for quite some time, which is truly a shame because I always enjoyed writing. But it was clear to me that my thoughts were not private, and privacy was just not something I had the luxury of having in her household. So I did stop writing for quite some time. I just felt like if she put half the effort investigating her husband's movements as she did mine, perhaps the truth would have been revealed much sooner. And for me, it's just amazing the things that can go on underneath one roof and just how blinded people can be, or perhaps pretend to be. All I can tell you for sure was that no matter how academically challenging my courses were in high school, I handled my business because I viewed education and college as a way to get out of her household and never come back. I was determined to bury my head in the sand for those 4 years, get my grades, get accepted to college, and just break out like my sister did. While all of my other high school cohorts are enjoying their youth, dating, partying, living, and making memories, I was focused on securing my future because I knew that there was no one coming to save me and I would definitely have to save myself. So by April and May of 1998, I'd received offer letters back from quite a few schools. Two of them offered me full tuition scholarships. One of those schools was the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, and that was a military college. And they'd recently gone co-ed in 1997. However, I did not want to attend a military college because I just had my fill of it in high school. And so somebody might be like, well, why did you even apply if you didn't want to attend? Well, my aunt. My aunt. I didn't want to attend the Citadel because at that time there were women in the news complaining about being hazed. And it just wasn't a good personal fit for me at all. Like, I just genuinely didn't want to go there. I never wanted to go there. And the only reason I applied is because I was forced to. Now, naturally, when they send me an offer letter and they're offering a full tuition scholarship, it was right up my aunt's alley, right? A military college would have been nothing more than an extension of her household. More discipline, more rules, more regulations. But me, I was having absolutely none of it. I had enough of feeling like people were controlling my every move or like I needed permission to just live. So I turned that offer down faster than anyone could ever imagine. Literally, they didn't even need to send that letter to me because I was just so not interested. The second free tuition scholarship came from Bennett College in North Carolina. It's an all-female college, and when I went to visit the college, I got on the campus and I was just less than impressed. There was nothing about the school that made me feel like I would thrive there. More specifically, their communication studies department just was not impressive to me at all, and that is what I was going to be majoring in. Again, it was an all-girls school, and when they began talking about all the rules and regulations in place for the freshmen, I saw my aunt's eyes light up. The person giving us the tour is talking about, how we got to be back in the dorm by 11 o'clock or the doors close and lock. And, I just saw her getting really excited because what she wanted me to do was go to a college that was basically an extension of the jail that her house felt like, right? And naturally, that was a turnoff for me. Because by the age of 18, I simply didn't want to feel like I was attending any institution of higher learning that even remotely felt like the jail I'd been in since the age of 7. I wanted to feel free. Like, seriously, I felt like I was a prisoner up for parole, and I wasn't trying to play no games about my freedom. Okay, I wanted a normal college experience, and if that meant taking out college loans, so be it. So I told my aunt that I would not be attending Bennett or the Citadel, and literally all hell broke loose. And that's the thing about witchcraft. People who are oppressed by that evil spirit literally lose it when they realize that they can no longer control another human being. Okay, my aunt's reign of control was legally coming to an end because at the age of 18, I literally no longer needed her permission to do anything. Right? I understood that she had no say whatsoever regarding what college I would attend because she was not paying a dime for me to go. So any loans, grants, or scholarships would all be in my name. And because of that, I was going to choose the school that I wanted to go to. And so when I made it very clear to her that I would not be going to either of those schools, nor would I be majoring in engineering, she literally beat me. And when I say beat, that is precisely what I mean. Okay? If it wasn't glued down, she grabbed it and beat me with it. And on that day, I remember the rage, the anger, the yelling, the cursing, the threatening. It was so incredibly wicked. All of her years of attempting to literally control every single aspect of my life was flashing before her eyes, and it was as though she was wondering how I had the nerve to want to make my own decisions. Well, after she beat me senselessly, she drove me to my Saturday session at PACE, the engineering program that I told you about earlier, and she dropped me off as though it were any other Saturday. Okay, however, I didn't go all the way inside to join the other students. My eyes were puffy, and I was just literally reeling after such an ordeal. I had obviously received spankings from her before over the years, but that was not a spanking. That was a beating. There was a lot of anger and rage involved in that, and I understood exactly why she was as angry as she was. Like, she was losing control. And because she was losing control, she was losing her mind. Okay. I didn't go inside to join the other students, but I was in the hallway and I found a payphone and I called my cousin, who was her middle daughter. And this was the daughter that I happened to be very close to. So I was not close to her youngest daughter, as I explained earlier. And her oldest daughter was already married and, living her life. But the middle daughter and I had a very beautiful relationship. And I told her what happened, and she immediately told me that I could come live with her and her husband, and they would drive me to school each morning for the remainder of the school year, which was about 3 weeks. When my aunt came to pick me up from Pace, she went back to the house. We went back to the house, and my cousin was already there. She told my aunt that she was taking me, and she told me to pack my things. My aunt proceeded to physically assault her own daughter, who I just told you is grown and married, and told her to get out of the house. She also told my cousin that she was my legal guardian and taking me would be illegal. And after she kicked my cousin, her daughter, out of the house, she proceeded to yell at and degrade me for involving my cousin. She was very angry that I had called my cousin and told my cousin what she'd done. Here's what I can tell you. By the time I put head to pillow that night, I was sure of two things. Okay? Getting out of that house was not optional, and being successful in life wasn't either, because there could be no way that I needed to come back to that house to live after college. Like, I felt like I had to make this work for myself. And when I say this, I mean life. I mean, you have got to be a success, Dorothy, because this house, you cannot come back here. You cannot need these people for anything. Okay? I graduated from high school, and I do remember my father being there, but I don't remember my mother being in attendance. And truth be told, I'm not even sure I cared about that, because there was just so much going on. I was ready to be done with high school. You hear what I say? I was ready to be done. And I was ready to finally pack my belongings and head off to school to start my life as a young adult. I chose to go to the College of New Jersey, which was located in Ewing, New Jersey, which is probably about 45 minutes. Actually, no, probably about an hour from Fairhaven. But what I didn't understand is that when you have unresolved childhood trauma, brokenness, anger, resentment, abandonment, and rejection coming along with you, it doesn't really matter where you go, right? You can't escape these things. So I left my aunt's house, but the trauma of living in her house didn't leave me.